When did you witness someone's large ego get absolutely flattened? It's a regular Tuesday afternoon at my office, which for the sake of anonymity and added spice I'll call the hive of professionalism, because let's face it, most of us are buzzing around pretending to work while really just trying to survive until the next coffee break. Anyway, every workplace has that one person with an ego so inflated it could probably be classified as a hot air balloon. Ours was Greg. Greg, dear readers, was the quintessential office braggart. He had the audacity of a used car salesman, the subtlety of a sledgehammer, and the self-awareness of a brick. Greg wasn't just good at his job, Greg was the best, at least, according to Greg. He'd won the Office Salesperson of the Year award 3 years in a row, and trust me, he never let us forget it. His office wall was like a shrine to his own greatness, plastered with certificates, framed articles, and, of course, the obligatory photos of him shaking hands with minor local celebrities. Greg had a habit of turning every conversation into a monologue about his latest sales triumph, often peppered with phrases like, "when I closed the deal," and "as the top performer in this company." You'd ask him how his weekend was, and 20 minutes later, you'd know the intricacies of his latest pitch, but nothing about whether he actually enjoyed his time off. If humility were a currency, Greg would be bankrupt. One fateful day, we had a new intern join the office. Let's call him Tim. Tim was fresh out of college, brimming with youthful enthusiasm and blissfully unaware of the office dynamics. On his first day, he made the mistake of asking Greg how to use the photocopier. Greg responded with his usual air of condescension, acting as if he was the gatekeeper of all knowledge within the hive of professionalism. He gave Tim a 20-minute lecture on the art of photocopying, complete with personal anecdotes and a not-so-subtle jab at how he could single-handedly keep the office running if he had to. Tim listened intently, nodding at appropriate intervals. Little did Greg know, Tim had been the president of the engineering club at his university, where he dealt with machines far more complex than our prehistoric photocopier. But Tim played along, sensing that contradicting Greg would not be the best way to start his internship. Now, in a twist of fate that could only be described as poetic, our CEO announced an office-wide competition the next week, the Great Hive Challenge. It was a series of team-building exercises designed to boost morale and, probably, to justify the CEO's purchase of an expensive leadership seminar. The prize? A coveted extra day off and a ridiculously oversized trophy. Greg, of course, appointed himself as team leader and immediately began strategizing as if this was the Olympics of office competitions. He divided us into groups, assigned roles, and even held a pre-challenge pep talk, during which he liberally quoted from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I'm not making this up. He genuinely believed he was leading us into battle. The challenge was a mix of mental and physical tasks, each more ridiculous than the last. We had the usual trust falls, blindfolded maze navigation, and a trivia round about company history that even the CEO struggled with. Greg, naturally, took charge of the trivia, barking out answers with the certainty of a game show host. But the final event was the hardest of all, an obstacle course. And not just any obstacle course, but one that included a rock climbing wall, a series of balance beams, and a mud pit. Yes, a mud pit. Because nothing says team building like watching your colleagues faceplant into a pool of sludge. Greg, in his infinite wisdom, decided that he would tackle the rock climbing wall. "I've got this," he declared with the confidence of a man who once climbed a moderately steep hill on a hiking trip 5 years ago. Watch and learn, team. We all gathered around, a mix of amusement and dread in our eyes. Greg strutted up to the wall, adjusted his gear with the precision of a man preparing for a mission to Mars, and began his ascent. For the first few feet, he seemed to be doing okay. He moved with an air of arrogance that suggested he thought he was channeling Spider-Man himself. But then, disaster struck. Halfway up, Greg's foot slipped. In a desperate attempt to regain his footing, he flailed his arms wildly, resembling a cat that just discovered it hates water. Gravity, being the unforgiving force it is, took over. Greg's heroic climb turned into a slow-motion descent of epic proportions. He didn't just fall, he flopped. With an ungraceful splat, Greg landed in the mud pit below. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of people collectively try to decide if it's appropriate to laugh or if they should rush to see if the person is okay. Greg, covered in mud and looking like a drowned rat, stood up slowly. His ego, once towering and unassailable, was now as deflated as an old balloon. Tim, our dear intern, chose this exact moment to innocently ask, "Do you need help with that, Greg?" The laughter that followed could probably be heard in the next state. Greg, the self-proclaimed king of the office, had been dethroned by a muddy obstacle course and a well-timed question. From that day forward, the legend of Greg's great fall was recounted in hushed tones and gleeful whispers. The once imperious Greg became significantly more humble, his rock climbing fiasco serving as a constant reminder that even the mightiest can fall, especially if they try to climb a wall they have no business climbing. And Tim? Well, Tim became somewhat of a hero in the office, the man who unwittingly brought down the mighty Greg. In the weeks that followed, the office dynamic shifted. Greg's daily boast sessions were replaced with awkward smiles and the occasional self-deprecating joke about his mud bath. Tim, meanwhile, became a legend in his own right, the intern who had single-handedly done what no one else dared to, take Greg down a peg or two. But the story doesn't end there. The trophy, in all its gaudy glory, was awarded to our team. Greg graciously accepted it on our behalf, albeit with a sheepish grin and mud still lingering in the creases of his suit. The extra day off was a sweet victory, but the real prize was the collective sigh of relief that followed Greg's tumble from grace. And as for the Great Hive Challenge, it became an annual event, a reminder of the time when the office braggart met his match in the form of an obstacle course and a fresh-faced intern. Each year, new employees hear the tale of Greg's downfall, a cautionary story about the perils of overconfidence and the unpredictable nature of office life. So, dear AskReddit, that's the story of how an office legend's ego was absolutely flattened by a combination of overconfidence, gravity, and mud. Moral of the story? Never underestimate the power of a humble intern and the comedic timing of life.